All right, good morning. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and start class in the auditorium. If I could get my wife to sit down. No, I didn't call my wife out. I would never do that. Would never do that. Hey, well, good morning, everybody. Good to see y'all. We had a great crowd this morning. Lots of visitors. I see visitors in the class. It's good that you're here with us. Please go by and make sure that you meet our visitors that are here if you haven't already. I tried to meet several this morning, so please do that. Hope you are following along in our daily Bible reading that we're doing, the plan. Please do that. I'm telling you, if you are doing that, you know the sermons that Austin's doing is really, you get more out of it because you've already read that for the week. So that definitely helps when we're studying and hearing God's word from the pulpit. So please do that. And I want to say, if you haven't started, well, then start. Then start. Question be, why would you not do that? The elders are asking you to please do that. And the church wants you to do that. So if you haven't, I don't know what your thoughts are, but how can reading God's word each week be a bad thing? So please do. And then also I want to encourage you. I know life gets busy. And I know when you're working and you've got families and things happen, and sometimes you may go a week and it doesn't get done. You can't read or whatever. That's okay. Don't let, because you haven't, maybe 3 or 4 months down the road, maybe you go through a couple of weeks and maybe for whatever reason you don't get it done. Don't quit. Just stick with it. Pick back up. Just don't quit. Just tell yourself don't quit. So I want to encourage you to please be committed to doing that this year. All right, last week we're in John chapter 2 and we're studying miracles. And last week we were doing the first miracle of Christ, turning the water to wine. And we had gotten kind of halfway through it. I just want to pick up there today, and then we're going to move on to a second miracle. But we were down at verse 5, and I really, really appreciate, we had great comments last week, a lot of good thoughts around what does this mean when Jesus says to his mother, she says, Jesus, you can do something about this. Please do something. And then, he says, in verse 4, let me read it. Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour is not yet come." We've talked about what does that mean, because in essence he acts like he's rebuking her here, and maybe a better way. I want to say there's a couple things here. A lot of good comments last week, but maybe a better way of looking at this, the way he's saying this, if you look at other phrases like this in the Bible, maybe he's kind of saying, just leave me to act, as I please. Maybe that's a better way to see this. In other words, he wants to make sure that, hey, Mom. And he didn't call her mom here, right? He chose to call her woman, which was not a bad thing. It's like lady or ma'am today. But he didn't call her mother. In other words, like he's being formal with her here a little bit. Like, I'm not calling you mother, but woman, lady, in a polite way, you don't have anything to do with when my ministry is going to start, or when I'm going to, my hour, when I'm going to tell the world that I am Christ, that I am the Messiah. Now, shortly thereafter, he goes and does a miracle, but does he say he's the Christ? No, he doesn't do that yet. So his hour has not come from that standpoint. And I know one other point I wanted to make, I know we talked that maybe she's simply looking at him as a resourceful son, right? Maybe Jesus has been a good son. I know he's been a good son, but maybe he was one that was able to get things done. Not miraculous, not calling on his divinity, but maybe she just thought, hey, you got these guys with you. Y'all go do something. Maybe she wasn't even thinking, right, that he could do a miracle. But then I think, we went back to Luke, and look, when he was born, the angel came to her and told her a lot of things about who was going to be born to her. She knew a lot, and said she pondered those things in her heart. And she knew who he was. Okay, she knew who he was. And do you think that when she saw that he was baptized, and then she saw that he started choosing disciples, I got to believe, she's a smart lady, I got to believe she started putting things together, right? She probably realized that he's about to start his ministry. Because she started seeing these things. So maybe she is thinking, it's time for you to move on now and to make this step. But he's making it clear that it is God who will determine when he will start. It is not Mary that's going to be determining that. So then we move on to verse 6. And now there were set 6 water pots of stone according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. And Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water. And they filled them to the brim. Now, you know, these water pots, you can look over in Matthew 15 too. We're not going to go there, but they had traditional washings, right? Now, these were traditions of the Jews where every time they had a meal, they had to go through this elaborate washing. And they had these stone water pots. They were everywhere. If you had a home, you had these stone water pots, and they were filled with water, and that's what you would do your washing with. Okay, so you could say this is a representation kind of the old law, I'm thinking here, right, of these water. Now, they did not use skins. Okay, they did not use the skins. The wine skins, that's what they normally would put wine in. And if you put wine in wine skins, well, guess what? If you used a wine skin over and over and over and had wine in it, and then let's say you decide, I'm just going to put some water in that wine skin. You think that water might have a hint of wine taste? Yeah, because that wine still is seeped into the skin. So he's not saying go fill up these wine skins. Would there be wine skins around? You bet, right? They've been using wine. There have been tons of empty wine skins around, but he did not say go fill up the wine skins. He chose to do the water pots wines because he wants to make sure this is absolutely clear this is a miracle. Okay, this is something that I am doing here. Make no mistake, okay, that it's not some trickery or something like that. And I also like the fact the 180 gallons here, that is a lot, right? Roughly 180 gallons that these water pots held. And this is another reminder to us that is my God and your God good? Man, he gives us overflowing blessings, right? When he decides to give to us, it's not just a little, or I'm going to give you just he overflows, right? He gives us a lot. And I was reminded of, you know, the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, when all the people were listening to him and they were out of food, you know, and he was telling the disciples, you handle it. And, you know, they were freaking out because they didn't know. They said, well, we don't have so much money, and we don't, you know. Then he took the 5 loaves and two fish, and he fed the multitudes. And then what was left over was 12 baskets still left over. It wasn't just barely enough. Hey, everybody can only have, you know, you can have a half a fish. And you get a third of a, you know. I mean, it was overflowing. And the Bible, you know, definitely says over in Luke 6:38 that what is given back to me by God, okay, is what? It's good measure. It's pressed down. Okay? It's shaken, so it's absolutely full as it can be. And then what? It is running over. That's the God that loves me. And I think that's exactly what I see here from Jesus. He's going to do this, but it's going to be in abundance, what he's going to give. It's not going to be just enough. He's going to give them in an abundance here. So the wine is taken to the feast, the master of the feast, in verses 8 through 10, which I know we read all this last week. But a couple things to remember, that the master here, he's the head waiter. So he's the person in charge, you know, like the kind of a wedding planner or whatever. But, you know, like today, if you're having a big wedding, you might have it catered, so you got somebody responsible for the food and everything. Well, he's responsible for the drink, for the food, to make sure everything goes off. And we talked about how important culturally and socially the wedding feasts were to the family, especially the bridegroom's family. You wanted everything to go just well. So he's not privy to the miracle. He doesn't know what's going on. So can you imagine the servants, here they are bringing these water pots. These are big water pots, by the way. And I thought, well, how do they get those water pots there, I wonder? I mean, that's a lot of weight, right? Each one holds 20 to 30. Well, I think what it said, that's a lot of weight. So I don't know. Do they have a hand truck? I don't know. How do they get those things to them? But they bring the water. And do you think the servants, are they excited? Do the servants know something's happened here? Yeah, they're seeing this wine. Now, I'm not saying they've tasted it yet, but they definitely can see this is not water in the pot anymore. I put water in here, now I'm bringing it to the head waiter, but it's not water. And I can only imagine the excitement they have when they get ready to give the head waiter, you know, the water. He takes a taste of it, And he's just absolutely amazed at the quality of it. Now, this whole thing about, he says, this is unbelievable. I mean, normally you would give the best wine, right, at the beginning, and you'd give the worst wine at the end. Tell me the meaning of that. What do you suppose that's all about? If you're going to throw a big wedding feast and you're going to give the best wine at the front of the service and at the end of the time, and we said this could go 7 to 14 days too, right? These wedding feasts. What that might be? Okay. Yeah, I got you. So Nell, you're saying that maybe more the important family were there first. That you would, and then maybe, but all right. But are you implying there that they're going to be drunk, Harold? Or are you saying that they're just okay? It's just like anything. I think, Harold, you're exactly right. I think it's just like anything, right? If you're at home, and over a weekend, and you start drinking something, or you fix something you couldn't wait to have for the first time, and you eat it, and then when you get to the third and fourth leftovers of that, it's not nearly the same. It's not necessarily that it's any worse, right? It's just the fact that, I'm not so excited about this now. It doesn't taste as well. Well, if you've been in a ceremony, whatever you're drinking, I mean, if they were drinking Coca-Cola here or Dr. Pepper here, and you were drinking, over and over, after a while, it just doesn't taste as good as that initial thirst maybe that you wanted. A good one, right? And you mentioned maybe there's some people leaving after the first. Maybe they're not there the whole time, maybe. So you want to make sure that most of the people are getting the very best. So the word oisnos, and I don't want to, I've taught this before, we'll get off into alcohol and drinking and all that. We're not going to do that here, but maybe we'll do that sometime in here in the future. But oisnos, it's a Greek word for wine. Now, oisnos, you can't, by looking at that word, it could be fermented, and it could not be fermented. You'd have to look at the application, how it's used. The word could be either way. So when you see oisnos, it doesn't necessarily mean that the wine is fermented, but it could be based on the case. In this case, how would they tell that the wine is better if they were drunk? Let's say the wine was just fermented, and now, they've been drinking all this time. They've drank all the wine, it's all gone, and now the wine is better. Well, if you were intoxicated and inebriated, are you going to be able to tell that the wine's better now? No, you wouldn't be able to, right? So it makes no sense that you would do that the Lord would be making alcoholic wine. And Justin, see back there? All right, y'all just hold for a second. No. Thank you, Lee, for doing that. So I have a slide I wanted to show you just about the stages of wine. The first stage of winemaking. The first stage of winemaking is just juice. I mean, where you're pressing in the vats and you're pressing the wine, pressing the grapes. So if you drink that out immediately in the next few days or whatever, then it would be just juice, right? And then it goes to a second phase where the wine is kind of a tangy tasting. It's not fermented yet. And then the third phase would be a fermentation. And when it's fermented, that's when when it's alcohol. And the longer or the way you ferment it, the more or less sugar that's in there would make sure that. Lee, I still don't have access, but. Thank you, Lee. Yeah, they would water it down. They were known to do that, right? And really, wine, they viewed wine almost like a food. I mean, it was a substance that they took. And they had, if you read many times, they would have more wine available to them than they would water. Right. exactly.
Most of the time, 3 parts water, 1 part wine.
Yeah. And then, again, it had to go through the fermentation process if it was going to be. So certainly there was wine that was definitely made in the Old Testament to have alcohol.
Wine was included with it because the water wasn't as pure, wasn't as clean. So they needed something of a wine, at least of some kind of degree, to help purify the water, the unclean water.
Yeah.
They didn't have water treatment plants like we have today.
Sure. But the point is, there's no way the Lord made this wine to be intoxicating, and he's going to give 180 gallons of it, because if you start drinking 180 gallons over time, then you're going to become drunk. Okay, you're going to become drunk. I don't believe in 1 minute that he did. You can look at Habakkuk. Somebody turn that passage for me, Habakkuk 2:15. Somebody turn there and read that when you get there. Let me know and just read it. But also, notice at the beginning of signs of Jesus, look in verse 10 and verse 11. It says, this beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. It didn't say the wedding party, the wedding guest. It didn't say the guy over the wedding. It said the disciples believed in him. Somebody got Habakkuk? They could read that? Yeah, woe to you who gives their neighbor wine, drink to make him drunk, right? So that wouldn't make any sense that Jesus would be trying to help push along someone becoming drunk at a wedding feast like that.
It's okay to drink, just don't get drunk?
Well, we'll talk about that in a future lesson, Larry. If I go down that path right now, then we're going to be done for several weeks, because I've got some personal thoughts on that. So we'll do that. We'll do that one time. We'll do that sometime. I'd like to do that in this class. So the beginning of these signs or whatever in Jesus' work was, again, it confirmed belief in them. Now, what did they believe? What do you think they really believed at this point about him? Mike, what do you think the disciples, after seeing, so they believe, what do you think that belief looked like? Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons he made this comment to his mother is, God's going to choose the time that I start. And she didn't understand, the disciples didn't understand, they didn't even understand after he was crucified. He only had a certain amount of years to get done what he needed to do before they were going to overwhelm him. Because several times he had to escape from the crowds. They were going to take him and try to kill him before his time hadn't come yet. So it was very important to Jesus because God had appointed a time for that to start. Jesus knew that once this started and once it got out that he was the Christ, he only had a limited amount of time before they were going to crucify him.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah. And, I like to look at it in two starting points. To me, it's that when he started doing these signs and miracles and things, that's one thing. But there were other men in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that God granted the ability to do miracles and do great signs. He used, right? That's one thing. People will look at that and think, well, this guy's he's a man of God for sure. But when he finally said, I am the Christ, I am the Messiah, when Peter finally said, you are the Christ, that started a whole nother level of the clock ticking, right? That they were going to get him and crucify him, because he knew once he did that, the Jews couldn't let that stand. So, all right. We're going to skip over this. So last thing I want to talk about on this miracle was, this passage, the Catholics, they use like the foundation of why they go to Mary. That this is one of the things that you can go to Mary. She can intercede for you to Jesus. She's another way. And has sainthood, and she's looked at differently. But this passage to me only rebukes that, right? Because clearly when she asks him to do something, he rebukes her and says, no, wait a second. And he calls her woman, not mother, and says, no, you have no influence on my starting time of my ministry. You don't do that. And I was thinking also, there's another passage I was thinking about even when he was in the temple, when he was 12. And remember, they left and they couldn't find him when they come back to Jerusalem. And she comes up to him, and it says that Mary said this. Mary said, don't you know we've been looking for you? And what does he say to her? I must be about my Father's business. So, he's even telling his mother at an early age, I hear you, mother, but I must be about my Father's business. So but anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. That was something I know that Catholicism teaches and believes in.
And Mark, in addition to that, he was in the temple talking with the wise men and so forth. And I don't think that was a normal thing back then for 12-year-olds.
Of course not. No.
So for him to be in the temple,
right,
asking questions and this, that, and the other, even to set foot in the temple, somebody should have picked up on that.
Mm-hmm. Don?
Something that Zach said today about the humanity of Jesus and the deity of God, and what Mike just said, and then something that Austin said, I sort of put it all together here. He talked about how that in the sermon, his dad said he was disappointed in him. John, I think, really does a good job, if you will, of showing the work of Jesus in spite of his family. Because there are times when I think where it says that the brothers didn't, they said, go to the feast. If you're really somebody, go to the feast, because they didn't believe in him. And think about doing the work that your family either questions or doesn't believe in you. They don't have your back. That makes it even that much harder. And I think John points that out. And here, in this case, she was trying to push him because she knew how he got here miraculously.
Sure.
And yet he still said, that's not for you. You're my mom, but you're not the one in charge of this. That's my father, that the heavenly Father.
Yes.
Which I think John points out several times throughout the gospel, the idea that Jesus did things sometimes in spite of his family.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't understand him or didn't even believe in him.
Yeah.
Trust him.
Very good point. Very good point, Don. Hey, Justin, let's pull up the next presentation. All right. Any other comments? One last time for the water turning to wine miracle. Anybody got anything else they want to say? And we're going to move on to the next. Yes.
One thing that's important to point out, and when you talk about the Catholic Church making Mary a saint, they talk about immaculate conception. A lot of times on the surface we would think that was Jesus being conceived, but they've actually backed up that narrative and they make Mary a saint because of the way she was conceived with her mother and father, which is absolutely not in the Bible. It's not true under any circumstances. But they have actually invented a narrative before she gave birth to Jesus to make her the saint that they call her. And they've also made her a virgin, a perpetual virgin, which means she only gave birth to Christ. The Bible is very specific and very clear that Jesus had multiple brothers and multiple sisters. That Jesus was the firstborn, but he also had multiple half brothers and sisters that were born through marriage. She was the mother of those children. So they have invented a backstory and another narrative to make her the saint that they made
Yeah.
her to be. So
Good point.
there's a lot of in-depth study that, if you're interested in that, it's a very interesting study, but it needs to be pointed out that they have actually invented a narrative to make her the saint that they call her.
Yeah, to bolster that whole premise of her. Thank you, Mike. All right, we're going to look at stilling the storm. So we want to turn to Mark chapter 4. I love this story, this miracle. This is one of those, I say this all the time. I know you're thinking, well, Mark wants to go back to be at all these locations when they happen. But this is another one of those where it'd have been neat to be there to see this. Mark 4:35 through 41. So prior to this miracle, if you look at Mark and Luke, they show that Jesus spent a whole day before this, multiple days actually, healing people. He was healing all kind of people of sickness. He healed Peter's mother-in-law during this time. There was demonic possessions. 3 of the Gospels after this miracle, after this calming the storms, that's where he goes and sends the demonic man into the herd of swine, and they go off the cliff. That happens here. But Jesus is very busy. He's great demand, and we're reminded of his humanity here because he gets tired. It's been a long day. He's worn out, and he's like, we're going to get in a boat and go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Sea of Galilee, it's interesting. It's 682 feet below sea level. It is the lowest body of fresh water in the world. And there's only one other body of water that's lower in sea level, and that's the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is just south of it. It's not far down. Now, I don't know, anybody been to Death Valley? Any ever been to Death Valley? Yeah, I see some been to Death Valley. Jan and I were fortunate to get to go to Death Valley, and it's the lowest point in the United States at 282 feet below sea level. Okay, it's low. But this one's far lower than that, 682 feet. And it's surrounded by mountains around it that are 3,000 to 4,000 feet. It's pretty good-sized mountains that are around it. It's 8 miles wide, and it's 13 miles long. Now, I was looking, some of you fishermen here might have to help me. I looked at Wilson Lake. Wilson Lake is about 15 miles long. Y'all know where Wilson Lake is. I don't know, what's the widest part of Wilson Lake? Who could tell me? Anybody know? What? 3 miles is the width of it? Okay. All right, so you can see here compared to Sea of Galilee, it's 8 miles wide. All right, now it's called a sea, but it's a lake. I mean, really, it's a lake is what it is, but it has the title. Today, it's called, I forgot the right name, but today it's called a lake. If you go to Israel today, it's the name is Lake, whatever it is. It's there. So it has tropical-like conditions. It's interesting. Today, there are banana trees and stuff like down around some of the cities. It has tropical-type conditions there, so you have bananas that grow there. So it's a beautiful place. I was going to pull up and show you some pictures of it. Go look at the Sea of Galilee sometimes when you want to. It is beautiful. You talk about lush green around the southern tip of the sea. You look at that and you think, man, that is a beautiful place. Just as beautiful as any place you would see. So I can see where people will be drawn to want to live there. But because of these mountains and because of that warm climate, the cold air would come off those mountains and just come down that side of the mountains and rush down to the lake. And when that would happen to the sea, it could cause quick, really, really, really destructive storms. Okay? It was really known for that, and it's still known for that today. So on the shore before the storm, Jesus says, let us go to the other side. And Matthew even says, when Jesus saw the great multitudes, in other words, it looks like to me like, not that he was running away, but he saw the great multitudes. He's been doing all this work. He's physically worn out. He's got to have some alone time, like anybody. He's got to have a chance to refresh, regroup, to freshen up. And, their duty to follow him. They're his disciples, and wherever he goes and whatever he says to do, they're going to do. They're going to follow him. So it says in verse, let's see here. It says in verse 36, now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, just as he was. So in other words, he's tired, however he looked, whatever, he just came as he was, and he falls asleep in the boat as they start off. One of the Gospels says he fell asleep before the storm came. He's asleep, he's worn out. Get in the boat, things are good, it's pretty, he's going to go to sleep. The boats, we know that in other passages that Peter, James, and John had boats. They owned their own boats. And we can look in actually Luke 5, 1 through 11. Peter actually is in his boat. It's on a different lake, not this lake. And I think I was just thinking about how the disciples used their boats in the service of the Lord. They're fishermen. That's what they do for a living. But they had these boats, and they used them to help him so he could serve the people better. And I was just give me a second here, but I was just thinking about my car. I don't have a boat. I'm thinking about my car, my truck, whatever. Do I use what God's given me in his service? How about you? Do you? Does everybody here that has a vehicle, I think most of us probably have a car, right? So do you take food to anybody? Do you go visit anybody? Do you call, check on somebody and say, how can I come help you? Can I come do something for you at your house? Would you pick somebody up? If right now somebody needed a ride to church, would you pick somebody up, or would you be like, oh, I don't want to be inconvenienced by that. Do we really have to go pick that person up? You know, they use their boats. They use the service to Jesus. So we have opportunities all the time, and I think it's a good thing for us to challenge ourselves about that. So in the boat during the storm, so verse 37 through 38, let me just read this because we haven't read it yet. I'm going to start at verse 35. And on the same day, when evening had come, he said to them, let us cross over to the other side. And when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was. And other little boats were also with him. So there's other people there, other disciples following along. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the pillow, the stern being, the back of the boat. And they awoke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, Who can this be that even the wind and the sea obey him? And then we can read the other gospel accounts that are very, very similar to this as well. So we see his humanity. He's asleep. Like others, he needed the rest. I'm thinking about Jonah. Remember Jonah? When he got on the boat and he's running away from God's service. Jesus is about God's service, but he's running away. Remember? And the storm came, and he's asleep down in the bottom of the boat, and the people had to come wake him up. Now, again, Jesus is asleep. He's resting here. And, I think about the storm's going to happen here. And it's kind of amazing to me that he doesn't sleep because, have you ever been on a boat in the ocean? I mean, it could be pretty rough, especially if you're on a smaller boat. These aren't big ships, right? These are small boats. Okay, maybe let's say 8, 10 people in the boat, maybe, I'm guessing here. But they're not big boats. But it says here, Matthew says a great tempest arose. And then Mark and Luke, they use the words that literally mean a hurricane or a tornado-type wind that arose. This is a big storm that arose. Now, if you took a bucket of water, I want you to remember the Sea of Galilee. If you took a 5-gallon bucket of water, I put a 5-gallon bucket up here, and I filled it all the way up to the brim, and I stood here and I blew on the top of that bucket the water. Yeah, I'm going to make a little ripple in it. It's going to do a little bit. But if I took a plate of water, it's a little dinner plate, and I poured water on that, and I held that up and blow, what's going to happen? That water is going to just move like crazy, right? Well, that's how the Sea of Galilee is. Most of the Sea of Galilee is 30 to 40 feet. It can be 160 feet in some places, but most of it is 30 to 40 feet. So when those winds come off the mountains, and they're really tough, and it stirs up, and the waves get 6 to 12 feet, just like that. Now, I think some of you know, Steve, I saw you smiling back there. You know where I want to go, but my son Thomas, y'all know Thomas and Chelsea, his wife, and they have a boat. Like a boat, I think about like this. They have a boat, and they're out on the Pacific Ocean. They're living off California right now. They've been living at different places and traveling up and down. Well, Thomas had the boat, and he needed it to be moved. We were going to move it from L.A. up the coast to San Francisco. So me and a father-in-law, were going to go out, and we were going to be co-captains, and we were going to help Thomas get this boat moved up the coast. I have terrible motion sickness. I mean, it's really bad. I can't ride I can't do anything. I can get sick in the back of the car. So I had the little patch you put behind your neck, and I had the bracelet that's supposed to help you not. I was taking all the medicine you can take, I thought, okay, I got it all together. We get on the boat, and we go out into the ocean, and we're about, first hour or two, it's just great. Then we get way out into the ocean, and you can't hardly see land at all. We're about 17 miles out. And all of a sudden, we come across 6-foot waves. And, it's not waves like this. It's like this, Well, the next thing you know, I feel it coming on. Yeah, and then it was like, give me the bucket. And the problem was I started, it was terrible. So, and it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I knew we weren't going to be where we were going to be until midnight. So I had to, anyway, it was terrible. And I just know how that can be. Now I'm trying to think, there is no way a normal human is going to be asleep through that. You're going to wake up. But our Lord is asleep. Okay? So he's resting. They had to come wake him up. He's resting in this boat in the back. Now he's completely calm in his relaxation and his sleep. It says the waves are spilling over the boat. Mark says the boat is filling. And the sailors, the disciples, they're terrified. Now think about it. These are seasoned men. These are fishermen. You don't think they've seen a storm or two in their life? Of course they've seen a storm or two. This must have been one more storm that they've seen. Now, do you think, you see my question there at the end, do you think that God Almighty, the Father, did this, or Jesus caused this to happen? Or is it just happened to be, this is going to happen, and then this is just how Jesus is going to respond to it? What do you think? You think God said, I'm going to cause this to happen so my son has a chance here to do this great thing and to help their belief in him? Yeah? Yes, ma'am. Pat. Well, Pat says, could this... Yeah. Hindering his work, you're saying, trying to hinder his work. I don't know, Pat. It's a good point. I kind of I guess I haven't thought about that, but I kind of think of it as just these are natural occurrences that are going to happen anyway. And maybe this is an opportunity Dwight?
I think even the fact that Jesus could sleep through the storm was so called a miracle. You might call it a miracle. And I think it was for a purpose to show his disciples, look, he's even sleeping through the storm.
Yeah. I'm going to get to some points about that shortly, but you're right, Dwight. I like the imagery. It makes me feel good that he's at rest during that storm, because we're going to make some applications of that. So, why has Jesus not been awakened by the storm, do you think? We're going to talk about that. Why do you think that would be the case? He must have been really tired, Larry, right? If he's human, right? So he's wiped out. He's back here in the back. Yeah. Now, but Jesus, he's very fearful all the time too, right? He's always fearing about stuff. Right? No, he's not fearful, right? He's at peace, right, on that. Yeah. Yeah, right. They just didn't quite understand all that yet, though, right? But if they had the full understanding they had on Sunday after he was resurrected, they wouldn't have been scared at all, would they have? Absolutely. Somebody else going to say something? Yep. Well, I don't know. He was on a pillow. Maybe it's one of those big, huge, soft pillows that you kind of just fall into, I'm sure. One of those My Pillows. Yeah.
He's fully human at this point.
Yeah.
He's getting tossed about.
Yeah.
Right?
He's
So to sleep and not be afraid, could he also have not even really been moved the same way that they were? That was part of the peace and the no fear that he didn't really.
I don't know, but I know when I was puking, and the captain told me to get in the bed that is in the back of the boat underneath, and I got in the bed. I promise you, I was rolling around and moving. It just, she wasn't there. She didn't go. Yes.
I think this is something that's uniquely about Jesus Christ. I worked 75 years a very physical job, and fall dead asleep and wake up to a thunderstorm. Not afraid, it's just not something I can sleep through.
Yeah.
Even after working 75 hours plus that week. When we get to the healing miracle about the woman of the issue of blood,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus literally could feel the power go out of him. Now, I'm not saying he's got a supernatural battery that had to be recharged, but I think there's this unique combination of him being the incarnation of God, where the physical meets literally the miraculous. If you look at Moses' interaction with God on the mountain, people couldn't look at him without the veil in his face, and some of the things the prophets went through, and they had miracles happen to them, they were all flesh. There's something uniquely about Jesus having that much, being divine, but being completely human, that I think it's an exhaustion. It's not about peace or exhaustion or feeling safe. I just think that there's something unique about him and what it cost him to minister to us.
Yeah.
And we get these little snippets of how maybe his humanity was literally, he wasn't just the quintessential of God's nature, he was the quintessential of humanity, because the two mixed in such a way that caused scenarios that nobody else would have gone through. That's how he can really understand everybody, because he's experienced humanity even more as well.
Sure. Well, that's like a bell. Yeah. Okay. So my view of what he's doing here is I agree with what you're saying, is that he's physically tired, he's asleep, but at the same time, he's God. I feel like he's aware of the storm, but he's not worried about it. I mean, I think he's awareness. Yeah, I'm rolling around here. It's definitely a storm going on, but I'm fine. I'm calm. I'm not worry about anything. He's aware of what's going on. That's what I think. I don't think he's in such a sleep that he has no idea there's a storm going on. I think